A woman walks home beneath a full moon. Her shadow does not match her body. Above another village, wings open over the rooftops. In the trees, something shaped like a dog watches without moving. Near an old grave, a thin figure crouches where no one should be. Online, all four images may be labeled with one word, Aswang. That label is not entirely wrong, but it hides the most important fact. In Philippine folklore, the Aswang is often not a single creature with one appearance, origin, and weakness. It is a shifting cluster of fears whose members borrow traits from one another. Tonight, we are opening that category carefully, without pretending that every region tells the same story, and without treating folklore as proof of a supernatural species. The cleanest modern explanation calls Aswang an umbrella term. That is useful, but even an umbrella has edges that oral tradition ignores. A teller may use Aswang for a shape-shifting neighbor, another for a flying predator, and another for a person believed to cause sickness. A creature with a local name may also be grouped under Aswang by someone outside that community. The result is overlap, not a tidy catalog. Philippine cultural sources describe the being as changing form, flying, dividing its body, stealing corpses, drinking blood, or living quietly among ordinary people. Those qualities do not always belong to the same figure in the same story. They belong to a larger imaginative complex that changes across place, language, and generation. Folklorist Maximo Ramos offered a framework that remains influential. He grouped the Aswang complex into 5 broad types: a blood-drinking vampire, a self-segmenting viscera sucker, a human who becomes a predatory beast, a witch associated with harmful magic or illness, and a ghoul that feeds on corpses. The categories resemble familiar Western monster labels, but Ramos used them as analytical tools, not proof that Philippine traditions were copies of European ones. The local stories have their own bodies, landscapes, and moral tensions. The framework helps us see why 2 witnesses in 2 provinces might describe apparently different monsters and still call both Aswang. It also reminds us that classification is something scholars do after stories have already lived, traveled, and contradicted one another. Many Aswang stories begin with normality. The feared person is not a beast at noon. They sell food, greet neighbors, raise a family, or remain quietly at the edge of community life. Only later does suspicion gather around an unusual sound, an animal that watches too closely, or a person seen returning before dawn. This daylight disguise gives the legend its social power. The danger is not beyond the village. It may already belong to it. That structure can express real anxieties about trust, outsiders, illness, envy, and private behavior. It can also encourage harmful suspicion. A responsible retelling must keep both truths visible. The story is frightening because the monster looks familiar, and accusations against real people have consequences far beyond entertainment. The Manananggal is among the most visually famous beings connected with the Aswang complex. In widely circulated accounts, a human-looking woman separates at the waist, leaves the lower body behind, grows wings, and hunts at night. Yet the relationship between Manananggal and Aswang depends on who is speaking. Some treat the Manananggal as a specific kind of Aswang. Others preserve it as a distinct local being. Older lexicons recorded several names around night-flying and self-segmenting figures, showing that the vocabulary was never perfectly uniform. Cinema later fixed the winged upper body into an unforgettable icon. The image is clear. The taxonomy remains fluid. Calling every Aswang a Manananggal is wrong. Calling the 2 completely unrelated can also erase the way many Filipinos group them. Another group of stories describes a person who becomes an animal or a creature that moves between human and animal form. Dogs appear often, but cultural references also mention cats, pigs, and birds. The creature may be unusually large, unnaturally quiet, or wrong in a way the teller struggles to explain. These are not zoological descriptions. They are narrative signals that the familiar landscape has become unreliable. A path used every day now belongs to something else after dark. Ramos called one analytical type the werbeast or werdog, noting that cultures imagine transformation through animals close to their own environment. The Philippine story does not need a European wolf. It makes terror from animals people might actually hear beyond the house. Some traditions use aswang for a person believed to cause sickness through hidden power, intention, or even an unsettling look. Here the story moves closer to the social danger of accusation. Illness once poorly understood, sudden death, conflict between families, or behavior outside local expectations could all become attached to a feared individual. The legend may offer explanation, but it can also stigmatize healers, women, strangers, disabled people, or anyone already isolated. University of the Philippines Science Writing has discussed how symptoms of X-linked dystonia Parkinsonism on Panay could be misread through supernatural belief. The medical condition is real. The supernatural conclusion is not evidence. Good folklore storytelling creates space for wonder and fear without turning patients or neighbors into monsters. The ghoul-like aswang is associated in some accounts with graves, corpses, or the remains of the newly dead. Cultural descriptions may tell of a stolen body replaced with a banana trunk, an image that is both grotesque and strangely practical. It transforms grief into suspicion. What if burial does not protect the dead? What if the body returned to the family is not what it seems? These stories gather around one of the strongest human boundaries, the duty to care for the dead. Again, details vary. A grave-robbing being may carry another local name and only later be folded into the aswang category. The emotional core matters more than a universal rulebook. Mourning has been interrupted, and the community's final act of protection has failed. Aswang stories are widespread, but Capiz on Panay Island has become their most famous geographic association. Philippine cultural references note the strength of the tradition in the Visayas, especially Capiz. Popular culture, jokes, tourism, films, and news coverage reinforced that link until the province could be introduced as an aswang homeland. That reputation should not be mistaken for evidence that monsters live there, nor should it reduce Capiz an identity to a horror stereotype. Places acquire legendary reputations through repetition. A story told about a province becomes a story told because of the province. The label then affects how outsiders treat real residents. Folklore geography is therefore not only about where a creature is said to appear, it is about who carries the reputation afterward. Spanish-era writers recorded terms and beliefs they associated with the aswang as early colonial society tried to classify Philippine spiritual life. Those documents show that related ideas are centuries old in written sources. They do not give us a neutral window into a single original tradition. Missionaries and chroniclers often translated unfamiliar roles through words like witch, devil, or superstition. Indigenous concepts were filtered through colonial religious categories. Later historians and folklorists tried to read past those filters, but the record remains incomplete. Oral traditions existed before the documents and continued outside them. So the historical claim we can make is modest. Colonial texts confirm that related beliefs circulated early. They cannot settle every modern argument about what an aswang truly is. Horror cinema needs a creature the camera can show. It chooses wings, claws, glowing eyes, an extended tongue, or a body transforming in moonlight. Once that image reaches millions of viewers, it can become more familiar than any regional oral account. The screen does not merely preserve folklore, it edits and standardizes it. A film may combine the flying hunter, the animal shapeshifter, and the blood drinker into one villain because a single antagonist works better on screen. Later viewers may remember that composite as the traditional original. Yet popular culture is also part of the tradition's continuing life. Filipino artists repeatedly reinterpret these figures, sometimes restoring complexity, sometimes using horror to explore family, gender, class, migration, or colonial memory. The Aswang remains powerful because it refuses to stay in one body. It can be the neighbor whose shadow betrays them, the winged hunter above a roof, the animal on the path, the accused witch, or the hungry presence beside a grave. Those forms are connected but not identical. Their overlap comes from centuries of oral storytelling, translation, regional exchange, scholarship, and cinema. The responsible conclusion is not that every version must fit one diagram. It is that the disagreement is part of the evidence. The next time someone asks what an Aswang looks like, answer with a better question. Which story, from which place, told by whom? In Philippine folklore, the word opens a door. What waits behind it depends on where you stand.